Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Friday, September 6th, 2024. I've been doing a countdown of my favorite video games of all time through each day of the year, and coming in at number 117 is Final Fantasy X-2. This ranking may come as a shock to some people, especially many longtime fans of the Final Fantasy franchise. Putting this game above, for example, Final Fantasies 4, 5, and 8 probably seems insane. For those of you that aren't familiar with this game, or the game it is a sequel to, here's some information you'll need to know to follow along. Final Fantasy X came out in 2001 and was the first game in the franchise for the PlayStation 2, and the first one to feature voice acting. The game is, for me, a touchstone moment in gaming, and as you'll find out later this year, I love that game. I'll try not to get too lost in the sauce here, but this is what you need to know. In the first game, you play as Titus, one of Yuna's guardians. Yuna is a summoner on a pilgrimage to defeat Sin. Sin is a great, terrifying monster that really just kind of looks like an enormous whale and is out to destroy all of Spira, the world these games take place in. And based on the world religion, Yevon, Sin is apparently there to destroy humanity for its reliance on technology after forsaking the natural world. This technology is referred to as Machina, and Sin first appeared 1,000 years ago and wiped the enormous city of Zanarkand right off the map. Zanarkand was a massive, sprawling city with skyscrapers and just loads of hyper-advanced machina. Titus is, in fact, from Zanarkand, and through plot reasons I'll get into when I cover the first game, he is seemingly brought forth 1,000 years into his future to experience the events of the game and help Yuna defeat Sin. Joining them on their journey, amongst many other people from throughout Spira, is Riku, Yuna's cousin. Riku is an Albed, a people that still embrace Machina and reject the teachings of Yevon. She's a bubbly, energetic thief of a woman that's voiced by Tara Strong. This is when I get to major spoilers that are unavoidable for explaining this game, so if you want to avoid that, stop here. In order for Sin to be defeated, a summoner must make the pilgrimage to the ruins of Zanarkand and do some crazy ritual or whatever with the spirit of the first High Summoner. High Summoners are those that defeat Sin, but that defeat is only temporary, essentially locking it up for only 10 more years, referred to as the Calm, before another Summoner must do the same. In Final Fantasy X, the previous High Summoner was Braska, Yuna's father, so this is really interesting for her. The catch here is that both the Summoner and one of their guardians must die in the process. Near the end of Final Fantasy X, you discover that Yevon is a sham, and they secretly used tons of Machina the whole time, which wasn't really the reason for Sin's appearance at all, but rather it was the wanton destruction caused by war and infighting within civilization, and Yevon knew this all along. This did coincide with technological advances, yes, that was not the actual reason. Not only that, but you decide that this only lasting 10 years is really stupid, so you join up with Riku's father, Cid, and her brother, who operate a giant airship and take the fight to Sin. Through shenanigans I won't explain now, Sin is defeated forever this time, and the Eternal Calm begins, making Yuna the newest and last High Summoner. At the very end of the game, Titus, dies? But not really? But he's definitely gone in a way that implies he'll never come back. Again, I'm not going to explain that now. I understand it, but that's not for this video. Oh, and did I mention that Titus and Yuna were madly in love with each other? In the immediate aftermath of the game, Yevon is exposed for their treachery, and the world looks to Yuna as the High Summoner in order to help guide them to healing in this brave new world they all live in. Now, on to the game I'm actually ranking today. Fast forward 2 years, and a strange sphere is found. In Spira, spheres are basically the way videos are stored. They're just tiny little orbs, like crystals, and you can watch them with special machines. This sphere appears to contain Titus, or at least someone that looks an awful lot like him. Yuna joins back up with Riku and Brother, who now command Cid's airship and work as sphere hunters. Basically treasure hunters, excavating ruins and going on crazy missions to look for lost knowledge from spheres. They're joined by Pain, a mysterious new character, and they make up a team called the Gullwings. Oh, and did I mention this whole thing is very much Charlie's Angels, and Yuna uses guns now? A lot of people did not like the Charlie Angels vibe, and I think with very good reason. At first glance, this feels like character assassination. Yuna went from being an extremely powerful summoner, deeply skilled in white magic, and being able to call forth some of the most devastating forces in the world. Losing the summoning made sense, because that ties into how she beat Sin permanently, but how does she go from being an incredibly shy, conservative, robe-wearing support spellcaster to dual-wielding pistols and Daisy Dukes? For the record, the Daisy Dukes never get explained. But there's a lot more outfits than that. Despite its flaws, mostly in not taking itself seriously enough, one of the game's biggest strengths is the combat. Unfortunately, the combat mechanics are tied to something incredibly dumb thematically. There is something called dress spheres. They're introduced in the opening scenes of the game with what appears to be Yuna putting on a pop concert, but it's actually one of the early antagonists for this game disguising themselves as her. It's a fun opening scene that introduces a ton of characters. Basically, there's a device that allows you to access the memories or whatever of people in spheres, copying their clothes and their skills, and sometimes, if you wear the outfits enough, their memories. It doesn't need to make sense. It's a gimmick. This is how they applied a job system to the game and is one of the primary ways you customize your characters. Each dress sphere is basically a classic job from the Final Fantasy franchise with a couple twists along the way. Pain starts out as a fighter, Riku starts out as a thief, and Yuna starts as a new job, Gunner. Each job has abilities they learn throughout and different stats, often with focuses that make them interesting. Gunner is one of the most different ones right off the bat, with an ability that lets you spam the right shoulder button as fast as you can, firing your gun that many times in a short window of a few seconds. Those attacks don't normally do a whole lot of damage individually, but it can add up, and if you time your hits in quick succession with the rest of the team, you get a combo building, increasing the damage the higher the number gets. If you can time the attack right with a big hit from, say, a warrior, you can drastically increase the warrior's damage output. But there's a lot more to dress spheres than just picking a job. In fact, you're meant to change them throughout fights. Each character has a garment grid equipped, which you can slot dress spheres into, and you can move around the grid, changing their job along the way with little Sailor Moon-esque cutscenes. Since you can only move from node to node, this means you might want to think critically about which characters might want different jobs next to each other on their grids. There's a bunch of different grids, and most of them have little symbols on the pathways unlocking different bonuses like additional abilities or stat boosts, and there's often a passive ability on each grid as well. This makes preparation for some fights really interesting, like if you know you're about to fight a boss that does a lot of electric attacks, you can equip your party with the garment grid that makes it so you heal from electric damage. More options is not always better, however. You're incentivized to find a balance between flexibility and a small garment grid. If you take a character through every pathway on their grid in one fight, they can unleash an ultimate dress sphere that replaces the whole party with something crazy, at least while that character's still alive. You get massive stat boosts and can unlock some pretty powerful abilities to use with this dress sphere. It's a lot of fun, and while early on it creates some weird power spikes, it levels out as you get further into the game to feeling more like a strategic choice that I really like. There is one more way you can customize your characters, with accessories. These are equipment, then mostly they provide stat boosts or little support bonuses, but there's a handful of really special items you might find throughout the game, like the different lore items that allow a character to use the special abilities from that specific job, allowing you to always have access to that even if it's not part of your garment grid. The way the quick pace of combat makes you have to adjust to things on the fly and plan out your job configurations, along with the ways you can essentially dual class, makes Final Fantasy X-2 my second favorite iteration of the job system. You'll have to wait a little bit longer for my favorite though, but I feel like you get all of the wonky brokenness and customization of the Final Fantasy V system, while also getting more tension and excitement out of it mid-combat. Speaking of wonky brokenness, you can absolutely break this game in half. Remember the gunner ability that lets you rapid fire? Well, very late in the game, through an assortment of accessories and other setup, you can make it so you do max damage with each of those hits, doing like 15 max damage hits in a few seconds. It's crazy. It's probably the dumbest thing you can do in the game, and I mean that in all of the best ways. While all of this is great and is a big reason of why I view the game so favorably, what are we actually doing here? The first game was a full game. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And oh man did it have an end, as in there wasn't anything left to say or do really. So what story is this absolutely unnecessary sequel telling? Well, there is this whole narrative about chasing down these spheres to see if Titus might actually be alive somehow. Much of the game is about just checking in on Spira and seeing how everyone's doing now that their society for the last 1,000 years has been entirely turned on its head. It's slow, but people are starting to embrace Machina and move away from Yevon. The religion as we knew it in the first place is gone, but there's been a reformation as New Yevon. Basically, they acknowledge the crimes of original Yevon, but believe there was some truth to the ideas they preached. Maybe Machina wasn't the problem per se, but it's still important for there to be a uniting force in the world, and people need guidance in these times of uncertainty. New Yevon is led by a young, spirited man named Baralai. Opposite them is the Youth League, led by a man of great conviction and charisma, Nuge. Nuge has massive distrust of New Yevon, convinced they're still hiding some great threat. Also thrown into the mix is the newly minted Machine faction, a largely Albad group looking to help push Spira into a future of prosperity and peace, using the now basically universally accepted Machina to help people's daily lives. Much of the plot really revolves around these three groups vying for Spira's trust and attention. As perhaps the most famous person in the world, Yuna finds herself mediating between these groups a bit more than she'd like, as much of Spira turns to her for guidance and leadership as much as she's actually reluctant to give it. Earlier, I mentioned that the game committed some character assassination for Yuna, but that's really all surface-level problems. As you dig into the game more, we really see a lot of what made her such a beloved character re-emerge. The thing that made her so successful as a summoner and ultimately defeat Sin wasn't that she wanted to be the person to do it. If anything, she wanted to stay out of the spotlight as much as possible, but couldn't shake the need to step up and help because she could. Even amongst her friends, she was very closed off in the first game, which is one thing that made her relationship with Titus so interesting, because he had a unique way of helping her come out of her shell. The climax for me for this game comes when the three faction leaders all go missing in pursuit of a devastating weapon from Xanarkin's past, either to destroy it or maybe even use it, and everyone throughout Spira feels lost again without anything to cling on to this delicate balance at the start of the Eternal Calm. Tensions grow, and it looks like all-out war might break out, potentially ending the calm entirely only 2 years in. Yuna has experience with world-ending threats, but this wasn't one anyone could really just fight, right? I mean, it's entirely the world. This is where the search for Titus ties into the rest of the game. It turns out the person in the spheres they had found wasn't Titus at all, but instead a rogue insurgent from late in Xanarkin's life named Shuyin looking to activate Vegna Gun, the ultimate weapon Nuge, Baralai, and Gipple were looking for. Ultimately, he was talked down by his girlfriend, a famous singer at the time named Len. The songstress dress sphere that Yuna had been using all game was from Len, and the Gullwings organized a concert gathering members from all of the warring factions and diffused the tension with messages of peace and love. It also helps that through technology shenanigans, Len's final memories wound up getting projected throughout the entire space for everyone to see, and the whole world saw the folly of their actions. It's actually a great song and an incredible cutscene showcasing Yuna's greatest strengths as a leader that inspires the world.
I know that you're hiding things, using gentle words to shelter me. Your words were like a dream, but dreams could never fool me. Not that easily. I acted so distant then, didn't say goodbye before you left. But I was listening. You'll fight your battles far from me, far too easily. Save your tears, 'cause I'll come back. I could hear that you whispered as you walked through that door. But still I swore to hide the pain when I turned back the pages, trying to find a deadly answer. What if I'd cried my eyes out and begged you not to depart? But now I'm not afraid to say what's in my heart. 'Cause 1,000 words call out through the ages, they'll fly to you, even though I can't see. I know they're reaching you, suspended on silver wings. Oh, 1,000 words, 1,000 embraces will cradle you, making all of your weary days seem far away. They'll hold you Oh, 1,000 words have never been spoken. Fly to you, they'll carry you into my arms, suspended on silver wings. And 1,000 words call out through the ages, courageous. Oh yeah, all of the loneliness to only day, they'll hold you
There's more to the story here, and Pain is actually phenomenal as a new character, having a mysterious connection to the trio of Nuge, Bearlie, and Gipple, and the way all of that comes together at the end is pretty satisfying. Potentially not satisfying, though, is the actual ending to the game. Throughout the game, you can see a completion percentage whenever you save. There are different endings you get depending on your completion percentage, and you can even do a New Game Plus to go through it all again with your job progress and character levels and everything in order to try and get everything done. Most of it's the same across the endings, but the big differences come in whether or not you see Titus again or something else. It's neat that they put these differences in, but I feel like you don't have much player agency other than, did you do all the things? Which isn't that compelling for such a narratively important piece. The game is dumb and stupid, and most importantly, insanely fun. I love the garment grids, I love the job system. I wish it was themed differently, but it works. Story-wise, there's a lot to complain about too, there is, but Final Fantasy have always had some silly elements to it, just maybe not quite so low-hanging and fan service-y. But the parts to like are great. I love exploring the aftermath of the first game. I talked about the 3 factions, but there's a lot more side stuff too. You see all sorts of characters from the first game and how they're adapting in their new lives, largely in the fallout of the church. It's fascinating to see the culture shift throughout the world, and I appreciate that it's not all happy. For example, many formerly sacred sites, like the ruins of Zanarkand, are now bustling tourist attractions, forever reshaping the world, and Yuna struggles with that a lot. As a player who loves the first game, I struggle with that a lot. On a related note, I gave serious consideration to ranking Blitzball from Final Fantasy X as an entirely separate game on my list, because if I just measured by playtime, it'd be in my top 10. Just the sports minigame from Final Fantasy X, Blitzball. The biggest disappointment in Final Fantasy X-2 is that there is Blitzball in it, and they changed so much about it that it sucks. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 116th favorite game, where I have an existential crisis in an office building.